Senate voted to knock down Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. It's a rare bipartisan slap, but before we get our hopes up, this was more of a symbolic scolding to the president's trade war with Canada.
Donald Trump has stopped the discussions because a TV ad hurt his feelings. Tariffs are hurting our economy, hurting our citizens, hurting our businesses. Let's terminate this bogus emergency.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 46. The joint resolution is passed.
We'll put some pressure on Donald Trump domestically when it comes to where things stand on tariffs. And those are the baseline tariffs, the fentanyl-fueled tariffs, if you will, that started all of this, the ones that Donald Trump has increased as a result of being upset for the ad launched by Ontario.
But the Senate votes show that Republicans are becoming increasingly dissatisfied with Trump's use of emergency powers to impose tariffs on imports.
Washington has seen plenty of political battles before, but this one feels different. The U.S. Senate has just done something no one expected. They've openly defied former President Donald Trump's trade policy.
Donald Trump has stopped the discussions because a TV ad hurt his feelings. Tariffs are hurting our economy, hurting our citizens, hurting our businesses. Let's terminate this bogus emergency.
Colleagues across the aisle have not discussed is the ubiquitous tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers that our small businesses and large businesses alike face across this globe, from countries that are not allowing fair trade to happen with the United States. And the cost of that is being borne by the American people, small businesses and large businesses alike.
Voting to terminate his tariffs on Canada. For years, those tariffs were one of Trump's most defining and controversial moves, a symbol of his America First agenda and his hardline stance on trade. But now, with tensions rising between Washington and Ottawa, the Senate's decision is shaking the foundation of U.S.-Canada relations, and Trump himself is furious. The move sent shockwaves through political circles in both countries. Lawmakers in Washington argue that the tariffs have done more harm than good, straining alliances, driving up prices for American consumers, and fueling diplomatic tensions that have now reached a boiling point. And while the Senate's vote doesn't immediately end the tariffs, it marks a major political statement. The U.S. is no longer unified behind Trump's economic vision. For Canada, this is a moment of both relief and defiance. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who's been walking a tightrope between diplomacy and national pride, is watching closely as Trump's grip on America's trade agenda begins to loosen. Behind the scenes, sources say the mood in Ottawa is tense but hopeful. There's cautious optimism that this could be the start of a reset in U.S.-Canada relations after years of turbulence, but at the same time, Canadian officials are bracing for Trump's retaliation. Because if there's one thing everyone knows, it's that Donald Trump never backs down quietly. It all started with what many are now calling the fentanyl tariffs. These were the baseline tariffs Trump imposed years ago, initially as part of a broader crackdown on fentanyl imports and Chinese goods. But when a controversial ad from Ontario criticized his trade policies, Trump escalated, extending those tariffs to include Canadian products. The decision blindsided Ottawa, sparking outrage across Canadian provinces and igniting a diplomatic firestorm that has only grown hotter since. Now, the U.S. Senate's vote to repeal those tariffs sends a powerful message not just to Trump, but to the world. Lawmakers from both parties have expressed frustration with the ripple effects of the tariffs. Higher costs for businesses, strained relationships with allies, and a weakened North American supply chain. Even within Trump's own circle, some advisors privately admit the tariffs have backfired, hurting U.S. manufacturers more than they've helped. But for Trump, the Senate's move is nothing short of betrayal. Speaking to reporters after the news broke, Trump dismissed the vote as a political stunt, accusing the Senate of undermining America's leverage in trade negotiations. He's doubled down on his claim that tariffs are essential to protecting American jobs, insisting that without them, China, Canada, and the rest of the world will walk all over us. His supporters echoed the sentiment, warning that lifting the tariffs could weaken the U.S. economy just as it's trying to recover from global instability. Yet, across the border, Canada is standing tall. Prime Minister Mark Carney has so far responded with measured restraint, saying only that Canada will continue to pursue fair trade and mutual respect. But behind closed doors, Canadian officials are growing increasingly frustrated with what they see as erratic behavior from Washington. Tensions boiled over recently when U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra allegedly lashed out at Ontario's trade representative, David Patterson, during a heated exchange in Ottawa. Sources who were in the room described it as tense and uncomfortable, with both men trading expletives over the Ontario ad that sparked Trump's anger. The fallout from that encounter has only deepened the divide. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has publicly demanded an apology from Hoekstra, calling him a good guy who made a mistake, but insisting he needs to make it right. It's a rare moment of public tension between provincial and federal leaders on both sides of the border, and it underscores just how volatile the relationship has become. Meanwhile, the optics of Trump and Carney crossing paths at a recent international dinner in South Korea are fueling speculation about what comes next. The two reportedly exchanged brief but constructive words during the event, with Trump later telling reporters the conversation went very well. But insiders describe it differently, more like a polite exchange between two leaders who know their relationship is on life support. While Carney is trying to project calm professionalism, Trump seems determined to remind everyone that he still holds influence, even as his policies face growing opposition at home. What's remarkable here is the shift in tone coming from Washington. For years, Republicans and Democrats alike were hesitant to challenge Trump's trade agenda. But now, as global markets evolve and the geopolitical landscape shifts toward Asia and Europe, many in the Senate believe the U.S. can't afford to alienate its closest allies. Canada, after all, isn't just another trade partner, it's America's neighbor, its largest customer, and its most reliable economic ally. In economic terms, the tariffs have been devastating. They've disrupted cross-border supply chains, increased production costs for American companies, and forced some U.S. manufacturers to relocate operations. In Canada, they've fueled anti-American sentiment and strengthened calls to deepen trade ties with Europe and Asia instead. Analysts warn that if Trump returns to the White House and reinstates or expands these tariffs, the damage to North American trade could become irreversible. But the story isn't just about economics, it's about power, pride, and perception. Trump has built his political identity around the idea that America must be tough on trade, even with its friends. To him, tariffs aren't just tools, they're symbols of control. And so when the Senate stands up and says, "Enough," it challenges the very core of Trump's political philosophy. For his critics, this moment feels like long overdue accountability. They argue that Trump's trade wars have isolated the U.S. and weakened the alliances that are critical in countering global threats, from China's growing influence to Russia's energy manipulation. For his supporters, though, this Senate move looks like surrender. They see it as Washington elites undermining the will of the American people and caving to global pressure. The divide couldn't be clearer. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, Mark Carney is walking a diplomatic tightrope. He knows that celebrating too loudly could provoke Trump further, but staying silent risks appearing weak to Canadian voters. In recent statements, Carney has emphasized collaboration over confrontation, saying Canada remains committed to mutual prosperity and strategic partnership with the U.S. Still, it's hard to ignore the underlying tension. Canadian media outlets have been unusually blunt, calling the U.S. approach erratic and unreliable. Behind the scenes, diplomats on both sides are scrambling to de-escalate. There's quiet talk of re-establishing communication channels and restarting trade talks that have been frozen for months. The goal is to prevent a full-blown trade breakdown that could hurt both economies at a time of global uncertainty. Yet, trust is fragile. After years of unpredictable policy swings, Canadian officials remain wary of Trump's next move. What makes this story so significant is that it captures a larger shift in global politics. The world is changing. Fast power is moving eastward. Economies are becoming more interdependent, and old alliances are being tested like never before. The U.S. can no longer dictate the terms of global trade unilaterally, and leaders like Mark Carney are positioning Canada as a bridge between Western economies and emerging markets. Trump's tariffs, in many ways, became a symbol of resistance to that change, a throwback to an era when America could afford to go it alone. Now, as the Senate's decision reverberates through Washington and Ottawa, the question is no longer just about tariffs. It's about what kind of relationship these two countries want to have in the 21st century. Will they rebuild trust and cooperation, or will pride and politics push them further apart? For Donald Trump, this moment is a political test. Can he adapt to a new global reality, or will he double down on confrontation? For Mark Carney, it's an opportunity to prove that Canada can stand strong even when facing one of the most unpredictable leaders in modern history. And for the rest of the world, it's a reminder that the ties between the US and Canada, though strained, are too deep to break completely. And that's where we stand today, a world watching as South Korea drifts closer to China, and the United States faces a reality it never thought possible. The $100 billion deal wasn't just a trade move, it was a signal, a message that power, loyalty, and influence are shifting fast in Asia. Trump's shock isn't just political, it's personal. Because this isn't just about trade anymore, it's about who truly runs the global economy.